So this is a rear brake pad replacement on a Sports Series McLaren. This one happens to be a 570S, but the rear on most of the Sports Series will be almost identical. These are 4-piston calipers. This is a ceramic brake car, CCM rotors. Steel brake cars would be the same, it's just a different pad material. What's interesting is McLaren uses the same pad material front and rear. Most rear engine cars do, because they have a lot of weight on the rear, so they have a lot of bias on the rear brakes. Front engine cars like Corvettes, other cars that are biased toward the front brakes, will use a less aggressive pad material on the rear than the front, and that's pretty common. So we're going to put Paget pads in. This is the same compound front and rear RSC1, which is their kind of like their street track compound. They make an RS2 and an RS3, but they get much more aggressive and harder on the rotors. So we already pulled the pins so we could clean them, not have to wait. You'll also notice there's a very large heat sink on the back of the rotor. I'm assuming that's a heat sink because they use the rear brakes for the electronic stabilization control. This car does not have a limited slip differential or a electronic differential like some of the cars. I think the 720 has more of an active differential in it. Anyway, what McLaren decided to do on this car to keep the cost down is they basically use the rear brakes for both traction control and stability control. So they will apply or release the brakes depending on what the car is doing if you're running with the ECS system either on or in the, there's a second mode if you push once that is a little less intrusive, and then there's actually a mode where you can turn the whole thing off but ABS is still active. So these cars tend to wear more rear brake than front brake. This car was the same. You'll see the rear pads are probably worn 30% more than the front, probably just from aggressive driving. You can feel the intervention if you leave the ESC on. So anyway, we're gonna pull these pads, put the new pads in. The pins are a little more difficult to get to from the rear because of that big heat sink stuck there that the pins have to go through. This would be much easier on a 2-post lift where you could get underneath the car and see everything, but we're going to show you how to do it on the ground. So basically, we're going to sit down. Keep my knees intact. Lots of motorcycle wrecks, skydiving over the years. Also, rodeoing on a horse. So we've already pulled the pins, and basically all we did was use the punch to push them out the back, and we cleaned them. This has an anti-rattle spring or a locating plate. On this one the arrow points down. On the front it pointed up, but this goes down and the ears go out, so it fits like that to hold the pads in place. I'm going to remove the stock pads, get them out. You just have to work them out side to side until they come free, and they will. It's just hard to get your finger in the center. So there's the stock pad with about 8,500 miles. You can see the difference in thickness between the new ones and the stock ones. These aren't in bad shape. We'll hold on to them for later. One of the things I'm going to do while I've got a pad on the other side is I'm going to go ahead and retract these 2 pistons, because what happens is if everything's open, then as you try to push these in, these will come out. So basically I'm going to retract the 2 pistons on this side. So my head's going to be in the way for just a minute while I get piston retracted. one. What I'm using is basically a tire tool with a little hook on the end that you can get in there. It doesn't take much pressure. It's just awkward since the car is not up in the air. So we're going to retract this one too. And get this one back in. Careful, because I'm actually pushing on the edge of the rotor, but it doesn't take a lot of pressure to retract these. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide one of the new pads in so I can pull the other side out and push those pistons back. Now this side has the wear sensor in it, so you got to make sure you get that out. So what we're going to do is we're going to slide this out just part way. We're going to take a small screwdriver. I have my small screwdriver here. There it is. We're going to take a small screwdriver. We're going to try to pry this out before we get the pad all the way out. So anyway, so it wants to be difficult. So we'll take this. Oops. We'll take this, and you want to be careful and not break the sensor because they are fragile. So anyway, so there's that. So use a small screwdriver to get it started, and then we'll push it out the rest of the way. A little bigger screwdriver. Maybe we'll go to a punch. Let's go to a punch. So anyway, I like to pry it out before I get the pad out, just so I don't pull on the cable. So basically, and just be careful and don't break it, because it is plastic. And these things are not cheap. And it looks like it cracked the plastic on the back just a little from heat. Not bad, but one of the ears has cracked off. So anyway, we're not going to replace it, we're going to reuse it. Just be careful when you take these out, because sometimes from the heat they're brittle. And you can see that part of that's still down in there, so it was probably cracked before we tried to remove it. Anyway, we're going to reuse it. I'm going to spread this particular piston back. Becomes a little tighter in here. So there's that one. There's that one. Sometimes you have to work it back and forth, because as you push one, let's do this. So one of the tricks, if those are the pistons, you don't want to retract all the way, and we'll see. You can't see down in there. Set the pad away. So we'll retract this one. We'll put the pad in part way to hold that piston. It'll go in. There it is. And then we'll come up here and we'll retract the other one. So that way we got them both retracted. And now the pad should go in. So pad's in. Check this. Let's see it a little more. The hammer I use has nylon on one side and rubber on the other. You can get it at Lowe's or Home Depot, Harbor Freight, any of them. It's a hammer I use a lot for things that I don't want to damage. So there we go. So we're there. We'll worry about this in a minute. So anyway, remember, this goes down. So it basically fits in here like this. Holds the pads in. The pins come in from the back side. There's a slot in the back of the heatsink, and you have to kind of feel for it to get everything through. The more difficult one is to get this one in. Let's do this. Let's put the top one in first. That one will go a little easier because we have longer leverage on the bottom. So do a little tap. I'm not going to seat it all the way yet. Sometimes it's difficult to see these simply because you've got that heat sink in the way. It's easier to do this from underneath the car where you can actually see where you're handling because the pin is recessed. So now what we're going to do is we're going to push this down. We're going to start this pin on the bottom and this pin just to go in like that. So we're going to use the punch again. And basically seat it. Sometimes you have to finagle it a little just because the spring tension on here is enough to cause a problem. So anyway, so make sure that these pins are seated all the way. You won't even know it. Just when you get to the end, you'll feel a hard stop. You also can look in the holes and see if they're in. So just remember, arrow down, tabs up. So that's basically what it takes. From there, I'll go pump the brakes and make sure that everything's solid. I'll also check the fluid level in the master cylinder because we pull some out, because as you push the pistons back, especially on the rear with more wear, you'll see the fluid come back up in the reservoir up in the front compartment, and you don't want it to overflow and run down in all the electronics down there. So that's basically how you do the rear on a Sport Series McLaren. If you had it up in the air on a 2-post lift, seeing all this on the back side and getting to it is easier. The fronts are easy because you can turn the fronts and get the caliper out where you want it. Parking brakes are fine. I've looked at the parking brake pads. Typically those are only used when the car is parked. They're retracted right now, they're off. They're not actually used in any of the stability control systems, so it's basically here. And that's what the heat sink's for on the back. At least I'm assuming that's what it's for. Plus they've also got a very nice cooling scoop down there. We're going to insert this back in where it goes. Pull this out. Get that back in. And we have a little light here that helps us so we can see what we're doing. So anyway, basically, that's what the slot's for. So you need to insert this and get it started. And then what I do is I take a small punch, a very small punch, and I just lightly tap it in. So you want to make sure you don't break it. Although I've already cracked an ear off on one side, so I'm going to take my time and get it started correctly. And eventually I'll probably replace this sensor cable. I actually have cables for the Corvette that are the same principle. The difference is the connector's not the same, but you could actually take the sensor and splice it into the cable here, because the sensors all work the same. It's just McLaren chose to use a different connector on theirs. So basically that's all there is to it. I'll post my email address along with a video in the video, so if people have questions and want to contact me, I'll try to answer it. I might not know everything, but I'll try to answer as much as I can. So thanks. Hope you enjoyed the video. See you again. Bye.